Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So this coming week is Sexual Health Week, and lots of people are talking about sexuality and a lot of different issues in that regards. And a person that I have a lot of respect for, and I've interviewed before in the real estate business, has entered a same-sex relationship and has made some interesting posts in regards to sexuality and her relationship, and the fact that she's not lesbian, but she's in a same-sex relationship. And I thought it would just be really interesting to explore it all. And so I want to introduce you again to Kathleen Black, who is a consultant and coach and someone who leads real estate teams and how to become better teams. And Julie Thuet.
Jane Thuet.
Jane Thuet. I apologize. Jane Thuet, who is a real estate broker in the East End of Toronto, correct?
That's correct.
Excellent. Yeah. So Kathleen, you've gone through quite a big change in the last couple of years. You were in a heterosexual relationship. You're now in a same-sex relationship. Tell me how you went through that change.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't think it was a big change. I think that there's a lot of assumptions in life, right? There's stereotypes, there's assumptions, and I think people just assume that people are, as we know, this is common knowledge. People assume that you're straight or you're a certain orientation unless you come out. And for me, I mean, I always raised my children to say, hey, whoever you love is whoever you love. Okay. Like, I've never believed that I was straight. I just never really talked about it, but I also never believed I was gay. Like, for me, it was always about the person and their soul and their intelligence and, the way they believe and see life. That's always what's been interesting to me. So it was, I came out of a very difficult relationship that was very hard, and I learned a lot, and it kind of broke me open to walk the talk. And it was my daughter actually talked to me about it and said, Mom, like, you've always said that you're open. You always raised us to be open, but now you've done all this healing and you're ready to get out and consider dating again. Like, why do you only ever look for men in that circumstance? And I thought, wow, like, wisdom out of our children. And I was like, she's right. And I talk a lot about integrity and I believe in it, but I realized I wasn't walking the talk that I was giving. So I decided to be more open and ended up to meet Jane, which was amazing. And we kind of had this amazing intellectual connection and soul felt connection. And it was just so easy for me. So it wasn't actually a big change. It was more like a coming home and a partnership. And it was amazing. And I'm so grateful that I went through something hard that made me look at myself and say, hey, are you living what you're saying? So I think that's where it came from.
That's fascinating. And Jane, what's your story? How did you come into this relationship?
So I have in past been with almost exclusively women for my long-term relationships. And when I met Kathleen, it was very interesting to me that she was open to it, and she was very honest about the fact that this was kind of her first experience dating women, and that the reason for that was exactly as she just mentioned, that her daughter Ella had asked her why it's not something that she had explored before. So we met and it was amazing, and again we had an incredible connection, and Kathleen left after our first date for 3 weeks for business in LA, and we communicated the entire time that she was away, and it was interesting to me. It was never an issue for her, and it was something that I asked very, very quickly if this was something that she was open to exploring. I'm not in the closet, so it wasn't something that I was willing to go back to, and she was very adamant that, regardless of who her partner was, she would only do something that was in alignment for her, and it was never something that she would consider hiding or not being open and honest about.
Sounds fantastic. So tell me, the first meeting was a date?
Yeah, well, I guess it was. Yeah, we met for a drink. Yeah.
With the intention of romance or just to meet, and it turned to romance?
I think any first date you're assessing, is it going to be a romance? I mean, I went on first dates with men and right away been like, this is not going to go anywhere. This is not going to work. So I think, both, but it was a date. Like, the intention was to see how we felt. So obviously I was nervous, but yeah, it was just, I think what we're open to becomes easier. right? Like if we're unsure about it or we're unsettled, it becomes like, oh, can I do this? Or is it a big deal? And I don't know, for me, I find anything I'm comfortable with, like yeah, I don't believe in secrets. So no, it was definitely to explore romantic.
Now, a lot of
connection.
people would have sort of been trepidatious about the very first time sort of broaching the topic of a same-sex relationship. And it wasn't because of your daughter's openness or encouragement or
well, I think it was my daughter also mirroring back how I had raised her. You know, my daughter is her only long-term relationships have been now with another young lady, right? So that wasn't unknown to me. I mean, Jane has people in her family, like we're very open and inclusive. You know, my sister's on the fire department, she's on the committee for like diversity equity. Like this to me is very normal and beautiful and okay, like everybody being who they are. What's more amazing than that?
Now you've been, you say, out of the closet for a long time.
Not something actually that I had to do either. My family's very open, very accepting. It was just something that was natural. I don't think that anybody was surprised, and it was not something that needed to be talked about. I don't think that heterosexuals don't need to come out to their family and be like, listen, guys,
some do actually,
you know. So
some do heterosexuals. I don't know.
I don't think so.
Maybe
I've heard relationships where actually I interviewed someone where the two moms were lesbian, and the girls they gave birth to some daughters through a sperm donor, and they had to come out to their moms that no, mom, we're not lesbian, we're heterosexual. So it depends on what family you're born into, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
So what was the reaction from the real estate community when you came out?
You know what? It's first of all, I don't think I came out, and I think it is still confusing. Like I think some of my family members have said, "Oh, like you're a lesbian." I'm like, "I'm not a lesbian. What are you talking about?" Or they'll like talk to me about how people feel to be gay, and I'm like, "Yeah, that must be hard." Like I don't experience that. Like I just don't see it that way. I see that I'm in a partner with somebody I love and care about. I'm very happy, and I understand the need to identify. I just don't live that way. So I think it's interesting. I think, you know, I haven't had any personal backlash. I've heard of others saying, hey, people are messaging and asking questions. It's like, I give myself permission to be who I am. Did I lose some followers when I was more open? Yeah, but I also gained a lot. So, hey, there was some silent moving away and there was some silent coming towards.
So why don't you think you're lesbian? This is interesting. And you posted about this as well. And it was quite a long and interesting post. And you made a point of saying, I'm not lesbian. Why?
Well, first of all, I don't see my sexual orientation as exclusively only open to women. I mean, right now I'm very committed with Jane and I'm only interested in Jane, but I don't meet women and feel like, oh, would I maybe want to be with them or would I want to be sexual? I don't have that experience in my life. And honestly, maybe I didn't with men either. Like if I liked a man specifically for romantic reasons, that's because I like them, right? But it was never my identity that I'm a person who's only attracted to men. I never saw my life that way.
What a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for being open and sharing, because I think a lot of people are, you know, interested, intrigued, wondering, and I think it's important that we share. So I have a son who's gay. I have a brother who's gay. I had a best friend who regrettably passed away who was gay, and they all wanted to talk about their sexuality, their relationships, their loves, and they wanted acceptance. And I remember, you know, I think I've been incredibly supportive of my son over the years. And I went into a gay pride parade in I think it was called PFLAG, Parents and Friends for Lesbian and Gay or something like that, and carried a sign that says, "I'm proud of my son." My son cried and said, "Thank you, Dad, for publicly saying that you care and that you love me." But I, you know, had always loved him and always was proud of him. But for some reason, I think that it is important to say it publicly, at least for some people. I'm not sure about you guys, but I think it is important for, at least it was for my son, my best friend in university. And we were very close. We were really good friends, very, talked, all the time about business and stuff like that was going on. He didn't come out to me until he was in his mid-30s because he thought he would lose our friendship. And that was such a shame. And
it's such a shame. And I think the conversation surrounding it and people being open and vulnerable about sharing in this space is so helpful for other people who are struggling as well, right? And maybe a little bit confused. And I think it was incredibly brave for Kathleen to go out there and basically let everybody know that she doesn't identify herself to any of these labels, and it's okay to feel that way, and not to be boxed into certain to certain labels: gay, straight, bisexual. It's okay to live in the margins. It's okay to love who you love, and that.
What do you mean by live in the margins?
Like you don't need to fit in any box. It's okay to color outside the lines and find your own way and pave your own path, and it's okay that other people are uncomfortable by that. You don't have to be comfortable with somebody else's sexuality. You don't have to put a label on it to identify them, because that's not how they define themselves, by their sexuality. It's just a part of who they are.
And you're both very involved in the real estate business. So we're going to take a break for some messages and come back and maybe talk a little bit about, some upcoming events that you've got, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Fascinating conversation. Ladies, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm chatting tonight with Kathleen Black and Jane Thuet about real estate, about their sexuality, about their relationship, about Kathleen sort of coming out, but not coming out in the last little while to be in a same-sex relationship. And it's not human sexuality work, it's sexual health week. And so I thought it'd be interesting to chat. And Kathleen, I've followed you. I've read I listened to your books on my podcast, on my Audible. And you are a very impressive lady. You've got a lot of really, good ideas, interesting ideas. You've been coaching people on how to build stronger teams and work in partnerships and things like that. And so I think it's wonderful that you're out there authentically, openly, humbly, telling people about your story. So thank you for that. So let's switch gears just for a minute and talk about some of your upcoming events. So Jane, you've got something you're speaking in Ottawa on diversity and inclusion, I understand?
That's right. I'm going to be speaking on a panel at a reality conference, which is really exciting. It'll be from March 6th and 7th. And Kathleen will be a keynote speaker there as well.
Right after Jane's panel, in fact. So yeah, we're really excited because this is a big conference. So they bring in celebrities, they bring in, stars, and it's always well attended. It's usually in Toronto, and they're moving it this year to Ottawa, which I love. I went to university in Ottawa, so I love Ottawa. And they're going to have Magic Johnson there, who obviously has, been unbelievably brave in sharing his experiences with sexual health, and he'll be there speaking. I haven't heard him speak before, but it's known that he's a sensational speaker, as well as Dave and John from Shark Tank. So day one, right after Jane's panel, I'm going to be bringing my keynote home to Canada, the Shift movement. So it's been in Las Vegas and Los Angeles. We've been, where else? Orlando. We've been all over in the States, but we're bringing it home to Canada.
What's the Shift movement?
So the Shift movement is it's success for successful people. So, how do you move out of chaos, truly, of the outside world seeing you as successful, but inside you're feeling like, I'm being pulled in 10 million different directions. And how do I get back to myself and feeling successful? Because I've coached at this point, with stages, like hundreds of thousands of people, but intimately, big leaders. And when you get close and intimate with them and they're vulnerable and they feel safe, like, wow, the whole world thinks I'm successful and I achieved everything I set out to do. But inside, I don't feel successful. I feel run down. I feel burnt out. I feel pulled in every direction. I feel like I'm failing my team members, my family, my personal self. So Shift is a roadmap. It's a journey. It's an experience. It's not a keynote. It's an experience where we actually get in and take this journey on where are we at and how do we move into a greater sense of high performance, a greater sense of consciousness, so we can be successful collectively, whether that's in nonprofit and volunteer or our business teams or our families, right? Our schools. Well, you move out of the small mind as quickly as possible. The people who are most successful move out of the small version of ego much, much faster than other people. And that's by admitting we can't do everything on our own. We're not good at absolutely everything, and identifying what leadership looks like in ego, which I think a lot of people
leadership
don't know.
Looks like an ego. What do you mean by that?
So there's some key archetypes of how we lead when we're in ego, when we're in scarcity, when we're in fear, when we don't want to tell everybody that we don't have it all figured out, or maybe when we don't see our gifts or we don't give ourselves permission to live authentically. Right. And often that's the what is the word? I want to say overwhelming leader, but that's not what it is. It's the basically overbearing leader versus the absentee leader, right? So the overbearing leader is like, I'm going to throw you on my back and I'm going to make you win because you're on my team. You know what I mean? So they're taking ownership for all the success on the team, but they're not creating autonomy within their team. So they're literally doing
Is
everything.
that the
with people.
micromanager that I?
Yeah, it's a micromanager. It's a failed leverage. We see it all the time in teams in real estate where it's like, we hire this administrator, but they can't do it as well as me, right? So I'm going to do it with you until finally you're so frustrated that you quit, and then I'm going to blame you. It's because you were the wrong
And
hire.
then I got to do it all over again myself.
And I got to do it, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I have to sell all the homes because if I don't do it, they're not capable. Well, they're not capable because you're
But
not
sometimes
invested.
it is easier to just do it yourself. It is faster to just do it yourself, no?
Respectfully, it is faster when you're not a strong enough leader.
So you got to be that leader. You got to train the person.
You like your biggest skill set in leadership is to create other leaders. That's what we're there for. So if your business model rewards you more for having them not be as good as you, well, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
And then we have the other side, the absentee leader, right? Who doesn't have any SOPs, who hasn't documented everything, who doesn't have the tech or system to support people. So something goes wrong and the team's always left on their own to figure it out. They have no like terms of engagement, right? They have no plan B.
Right.
And the absentee leader is not cultivating the team. So again, they're stuck in this success to the outside world, but really they're drowning internally. So we help them shift out of that into what does conscious leadership look like? What are the archetypes? What are the mentalities? How do you know you're there? What happens if you fall out of it again, which we all do? So we talk about raft builders versus sinkers versus bobbers, which I don't have time to get fully into, but it helps people identify how they're self-coaching. Because that's my goal. My goal isn't to coach other people, it's to help people have the tools and resources that help us coach ourselves. So Shift, I love, and it's all about my energy work and breath work, and it combines visualization, and it's a full journey experience. So we've had really rave reviews, and I'm excited to bring it to Ottawa. And the second day of the conference, they're bringing in the top coaches from North America. So I'm on that panel as well. Richard Robbins, Jess Lenoble. We have somebody from Buffini coming in there. We have Matthew Ferreira, who's renowned for his mindset work and support of top leaders.
And this is primarily for real estate agents, real estate brokers, people in the residential real estate business
and commercial. It's to support real estate and real estate advocacy around, housing prices and access to housing and discrimination in housing, all of it for across Ontario.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And Jane, your panel is on
diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay, and what are you going to say?
So I think we're going to talk about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how to maybe connect with clients that are from marginalized communities, and how to be vulnerable in your online presence and with your clients to create those relationships and foster that safe space for clients to feel comfortable with you.
Do you think people don't feel comfortable when they're dealing with different real estate brokers? And
yeah, I think, oftentimes I think not everyone is great at connecting and building those relationships with their clients, and also creating a bridge between certain demographics, or understanding, being mindful and open and understanding of people in those marginalized communities. I think there are ways to go about doing that, and ways to, come across to let people know that you are a safe space.
How do you do that? How do you make people feel included? It's the old line about diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice. So how do you actually make people feel included?
I mean, in our space, it's very important for me to be vulnerable in my online world and my online presence. And when I'm with my clients, to let them know about my journey, to let them know that I'm part of the LGBTQ the community. Yeah, sorry. And that makes people feel so comfortable. It makes them feel like they can be themselves, that they can share openly with me. We get to know about our clients. We get to know about their background, about their religion, what holidays they're celebrating. We're invited over for dinner often, like our team goes over for dinner at our clients' homes, especially new Canadians. Just making them feel like they're part of a community is a really great way to connect with people.
So, if you were an agent or a broker in downtown Toronto, I wouldn't be surprised. But out in, where are you, Ajax or Whitby?
In Whitby, yeah.
I think that's probably a little unusual. Did you find any opposition? Were people uncomfortable with you at all?
At first, I thought that I would get a lot more pushback, but I've been in the business for now 11 years. At first, I kept my private life very private, and I wasn't living authentically because I wasn't being able to share these things with my clients and build these relationships that were where the foundation was openness and honesty. And so once I decided that, listen, if they like me, they're gonna work with me, and if they don't, they won't.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be anything but myself. And once that happened, I think the floodgates opened and people just felt more comfortable and wanted to be in a working relationship with someone that they felt they could trust and was open about where they were coming from as well.
Excellent.
And that led you to other initiatives, like Jane
Absolutely.
really advocated within Rotary to have a committee,
Yeah.
and you recently did an event that I think is pretty interesting, like how you're trying to share and open conversations in a safe space where people don't feel scared to talk about things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm part of the Rotary Club of Whitby Sunrise, and I founded our first diversity, equity, and inclusion committee because I thought it was important for people to have conversations. And I think oftentimes a lot of people's biases or maybe they're what seems like they are not being open, or what, tell me the word for it. I'm like stuck, sorry.
Oh, but like they're
like they're-
unaware, like it's an
Yeah.
unknown bias because there's confusion.
Right, and so there's confusion surrounding it, so until we have these conversations, and people feel like they're in a safe space where they can ask
Yeah,
questions,
be curious.
be vulnerable, be curious, in a space that is without judgment, I think, it allows people to bring down their walls and start having those conversations and be more comfortable with people, who live in these margins.
I think it's important because, we have these, preconceptions
Right.
of people that are different than us, and
Yeah.
actually having experience with sitting down and chatting or having dinner or drinks or doing business with people that have different sexual orientations, people that are from different races, from different religions, whatever that difference might be, is helpful because you get to know that they're real people, they're authentic people, they got their own. It's a lot less scary. And, I think that over time, I think about my own frame of reference, lots of people have met or know gay men. I think that, at least me personally, know less gay females. And so it's something that it's a little bit less normal. It's something we don't experience and have a conversation with on a day-to-day basis. And so I think it's fantastic that you're out there sharing and talking.
I think it's important, like this last
But you
year.
don't call yourself a gay female, apologies.
No, like I mean, Jen Arden talked about this recently. I don't know if you saw it on Instagram and how many comments saying, stay in your lane. You don't need to talk about this. Go out and sing. And it's like, well, wait a minute. So, you can't live authentically still. And I think in Canada, we've had so many different opinions about what can be normal in schools and what can be said. And I just think it's more important than ever to be able to be honest. So other people are like, oh, I can live honestly.
Yeah.
Because if you're in social media right now, like I'm shocked every day of how blatantly hateful people are willing to be publicly on social media platforms. And I'm like, this is public, like you're a business person and people can see this. So for me, there's no bias. If somebody feels empowered in an identity or a label, great. Like I support that 100%. Just like I would hope they would support me that, hey, that's not my truth. So I'd be lying to say it was, and I'd be conforming in a way that is dripping my power out of me, and then I can't do my work, right? So I think it's really important to be open and honest so people see, there's space for everybody. Like, what does it matter if everybody's being themselves and they're being loving and helpful and supportive? That's not hurting anybody. Why would it?
I think it's fantastic. So all the power to both of you. Wonderful.
you.
Excellent. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back in just 2 minutes and see what we chat about next. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. It's really interesting today for me to chat with Jane Thuet and Kathleen Black about lots of stuff, about their real estate careers, about an upcoming real estate conference that they're both involved in, and about their sexuality. It is Human Sexuality Week or Sexual Health Week or something like that. And so I thought it'd be interesting to chat about this. And Kathleen, since you've entered into this new relationship, you've been very surprisingly, interestingly open about your relationship and the same-sex relationship. And I think that's been helpful. It's been authentic. It's been interesting. And I think that at least I've enjoyed reading your posts and thinking about them. And so thank you for that, because I think people need to be exposed to people that have got different lives and different experiences than they do. It's interesting that the women's issues have become such a big issue in the last couple of years, particularly because of the decision in the United States in the Supreme Court about Roe v. Wade. And you were commenting during the break that there's been, just an incredible amount of rapes in the United States, in states where you can no longer get an abortion.
Yeah, and pregnancies in states, like there's 14 states where abortion is completely outlawed. So even we're talking about access if you're a minor, if you've been raped, if you've had an incest situation. And it's been interesting because there's certain states that have had voting on this and had, a surprise turnout, right? Where there's people even saying, I'm very Christian, I live Christian, but you know what? I have daughters, I have a wife, I have nieces, and if they were in that situation, I want them to have those choices.
Yeah.
So I think when we look at the numbers, like it's staggering. You look at across the United States since that decision was overturned, that we have over 500,000 rapes across the United States.
500,000?
500,000. And from those, almost 60,000 pregnancies that have come from that. And you look at, this is a really interesting part, and this is recently released in January. You look at the states that have access to abortion, only 9% of those pregnancies are coming within those states where people were raped and became pregnant, but the majority of them are actually happening in states that do not have access to abortion. So that would lead you to kind of think about this, like, how are our politics influencing our environments? How are our politics influencing how we believe about women's rights and women's safety and women's sovereignty and freedom? Because when you're looking at, for example, 45% of the pregnancies coming from those rapes since that decision was overturned is in Texas. Right, in Texas, where we're hearing
45% of the rapes,
the pregnancies
from the rapes
from Texas,
from one state,
yes.
Texas.
So that would lead you to have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions about that when we're hearing about
what is the question?
Well, I have many questions. One, when we're talking about a state that we know publicly people are leaving who have trans children, who feel unsafe in their homes, who are not allowed to publicly be themselves in their schools, and these families are leaving that state. And we're looking at where's the inclusion for people? Why is it okay that that percentage of people or that volume of women are being raped? Why aren't we talking about that? But on top of it, if I'm a woman and I've been raped and I then therefore do not have access to safe sexual health options, I don't have access to an abortion. And now what's that going to do to my socioeconomic situation? What if I don't have a family with money? Now I'm on my own. I've been raped. That's devastating enough. And the state tells me you don't get any choices. You don't get any options.
So effectively what you're saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm trying to understand what you're saying, is that there's a correlation between states that after the end of Roe v. Wade put in limits on abortion, if not bans on abortion, and that therefore for some reason is a greater propensity to rape. And so therefore probably what you're saying is a more negative attitude toward females having sovereignty over their own bodies. And so therefore what? There's more misogyny, there's more prejudice, there's more sexism in those states?
Well, it seems to be their politics seem to lean directly that there is more, right? If your politics is that you as a trans person cannot exist, your identity cannot be public in a school system, or if publicly you feel at risk for your life, like there was a higher percentage of people who didn't even feel safe going out in the pride parades because of the mentality in the state. Like that tells you a lot. So I think first of all, the numbers are mind-blowing. They terrify me. And right here in Canada, I mean, part of Sexual Health Week is making sure everyone feels included, everyone feels safe, but it's also identifying, even here in Canada, half of the pregnancies every year are unplanned, right? Do we have access to contraception? So there's a big advocacy this week of being asked to send into your political parties. And there's actually something right on the website for Sexual Health Week in Canada to encourage more access to contraception. Because again, depending on if you have money or if you don't, you have more access to choices and options, even in this country, but it's just magnified in the US.
Julie, we're talking therefore about misogyny and prejudice. Have you encountered misogyny and prejudice against you, either because you're female or because you're lesbian?
You know what? I've been very fortunate, again, just being in a family that is very open, has always been very open. I have my little sister also is a lesbian. And so there was nothing ever at home, and we were always raised to love whoever we wanted to love and be whoever we wanted to be, and whatever that looked like, as long as we were being integrous and our values were aligned with whatever we were doing, that was fine. And so, I mean, I have encountered on a very, very small scale compared to others, you know, any sort of misogyny or any sort of issues surrounding my sexuality. I've always been very confident in who I am and how I present myself, and it's, you know, it's nobody's business. And to be frank, if people have ever had a problem with it, I haven't cared enough to give it any thought.
And Kathleen, you actually had we had a public conversation about some misogyny and some abuse that you were.
Yeah, I mean, I think for myself, it's interesting because I mean, I'm more recently very public with my sexual orientation, but I mean, over the years, I've had multiple situations with misogyny or bias. I mean, even in the real estate industry, right? You look at the majority of people on the ground, sales, like driving the industry forward, are women. But you look on their stages and you look on the top coaches and you look on the people who are given space, main stage, right? Not a panel, not a breakout session, main stage. And it is 100% tipped the other way. As a woman who's a top coach, to get that space is very, very difficult. So I mean, kudos, I'm very thankful that Aria is putting me right there on the main stage and including me in that panel. And I give them full kudos for that. But a couple of years ago, I was in a very difficult situation. Some things were exposed to me. And as a woman, I feel like, you know, we're told, ask for help, speak up, like, you know, when something happens, get resources. And I was in a situation where things were exposed to me. I was very, very traumatized, not just upset.
What do you mean exposed to you?
I found a relationship I was in, there were certain behaviors that were happening and using their business profiles, let's just say for like a bait and switch, that it was there to help people, but being used for sexual ways, and going into sexual conversations, or, you know, asking for sexual pictures or hookups to people who could potentially be vulnerable, including people who are struggling from addiction and need help. And that to me as a coach and as a woman was very traumatizing. So I tried to speak up, I tried to ask for help. And even some public people who had been involved in politics for many years, who had been involved in the Chamber of Commerce for many years, actually said to me, you know, that I was a man hater, that, you know, I was a nitwit, that if I didn't,
a nitwit.
Oh yeah, if I didn't, a nitwit, and you know, if I didn't know better, they were going to tell all their friends not to work with me anymore. And then I had people saying, well, it's unprofessional that you're speaking up about this. I'm like, wait a minute, I've been through this traumatic situation. I feel like I have to protect other women. I've got to tell other people what's going on. And I'm basically being re-victimized that you shouldn't be doing this and this is the wrong thing. And, you know, just move on and say nothing, or you're wrong because you're speaking up. So it's very difficult when. So
are you a man hater?
No, but I think the world's given me reason to be, I'm not going to lie. And I think most women have been given that reason. And luckily I'm a very spiritual person. And I also know a lot of amazing men and amazing male leaders, and we need those leaders, right? I have a son, right? Of course, no, I believe and care about, you know, healthy men and healthy dynamics with women and men as much as anyone. Because if not, what happens? We have a bias in politics, right? Still top leadership towards men. CEOs, 1 in 4 is a woman. If you're Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, 1 in 16 are in the C-suite. So we need healthy, strong men, because if we don't, it influences our policies and our procedures and our politics in a way that can be very harmful to women and children, blatantly.
Julie, you said that your younger sister is gay, and you are.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I actually don't identify myself with the label either. I think I have been predominantly with women for so long that lesbian just seems to, if I'm going to fit into a box, that's the one that most people would place me in. But yeah.
But you think you're bisexual, or you don't know, or?
Not bisexual either. It's just, again, it was always for me of, who is the person? Do I love this person? Do their values align with mine?
Right.
It was very much had to do with the person, and it just so happens that emotionally, my I think biggest connections have been with females.
When was your first experience
with a same-sex relationship?
Yeah,
when I was 18.
Okay, so pretty young.
Yeah.
Okay. And Kathleen, your daughter is also lesbian.
Yeah.
I have a brother and a son who are gay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's a gay gene?
It's so interesting. We were talking about this, what, last night, was it?
Sure. We have talked about it.
Oh, yeah. I was also talking about it at our Rotary DEI event, and this happens so frequently where there's, you know, siblings in the same family who who are, homosexual or like identify as lesbians or gays. It happens often. It could be. We joke around with it to my dad. We're like, hey, dad, like all the girls in this family are gay. He's like, yes, of course, I love women. Like he can't speak English. He's very French, and he thinks because he loves women, everybody should. So it's just, maybe. It's
Yeah.
But yet you have been with both Kathleen, men and women. So, people talk about sexuality being sort of something that happens, not a choice. But for you, it was a choice, it would appear.
But what we do is based on what we believe, right? So if we live in a polarized world, which right now a lot of people do intentionally to divide, right? It's you're this or you're this. It's like, even gender, right? There's this whole concept of gender ideology, and that's just been created in the last, decade in Canada. There's been more shift and what is the word, like spectrum in gender way before even Christianity existed. Like this was known and accepted. So this idea that we have these polarizations that you're one biological sex and you're one gender, right? Or you're this biological sex, and you're this gender. Gender has fluidity, whether we like it or not, it exists, right? There's always been men who dressed up as women in the theater or who were more feminine, so to speak. Like we all pick our personas. I might pick a persona of the CEO, and the next day I might pick a persona of a yogi, right? It's something that we can play with. And this idea that identity is fixed instead of permeable, I think can be very dangerous to people, because for me, it's like, what resonates with me? What's my truth? That's my guiding north star.
So you think sexual identity and sex, gender are both fluid?
I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, biological sex, maybe not with the modern science, that's a different conversation. But yeah, absolutely, they can be fluid if you're open and accepting that that's a possibility for you. And maybe, I'm not saying just as an example, maybe Brian, you're like, well, for me, it's not. My truth is no. Like I only feel sexually connected with women. Fantastic.
I'm a very heterosexual.
Well, great, right? Like
that's who I am.
Fantastic. But this idea that like one is normative and one is not is just
dangerous.
Silly and dangerous, and it polarizes people. And that's why I think it's this feeling of like, well, I have to come out and will I be accepted? It's like, well, you're human. You deserve respect. You're accepted as a human. Like where does that part come in? Why does sexuality dictate acceptance?
I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable for some reason. And I think it's because they haven't met people like you. And that's not right. It's just reality. Sure. And it's just the same way people are uncomfortable with people that have different skin colors, or people of different religions, or people that are wearing hijabs or whatever. They haven't sat down and got to know them as people. And so therefore they feel uncomfortable for a while.
I think it takes humanizing somebody on the other side of it to break down those barriers and to start feeling comfortable.
And curiosity and compassion instead of fear and judgment, right? And that's with everything. When we get into fear and judgment, we restrict and we get really tense about things, and they have to be a certain way. And when you get into curiosity, you're like, oh, wow, let me just have acceptance and, be open to new things. It's just a more expansive energy.
A more expansive energy.
Yeah, it was very interesting when we had an event the other night surrounding DEI, and the majority of my Rotary Club is older white men, and older women as well. So we had these three groups, and we were talking about gender identity and gender assignment at one table, and another table we were talking about people's pronouns, and then also talking about microaggressions. And it was so interesting to see these people who really have good intentions, who do a lot for the community, but just don't have the education surrounding these things and coming into the 21st century. And there's a lot of change happening, and I don't know that people necessarily are trying to be ignorant. They don't know what they don't know. So it's a journey, this diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you have to meet people where they're at and give them a safe space. And it was just very interesting to watch people who had never heard of any of these things, or maybe thought pronouns were silly, like, why are we doing this? This is so much overkill. Or about gender assignment and gender identity. It's just very uncomfortable for people to think about transitioning or any of these things. And by the end of the night, it was beautiful to see people being curious, asking questions, starting to feel, a little more comfortable with the ideas and just opening up those conversations, you know, that's a floodgate that isn't going to close. Like, we're going to continue to have conversations about this and continue to be uncomfortable until we are comfortable and until we are inclusive.
Well, I think it's great that you had that session. I'd love to be included in a session like that. That sounds really interesting. Well, tonight is sort of that kind of a session. Stay with us, everyone. We're going to be back in 2 minutes with some concluding comments with Julie and Kathleen. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm talking tonight with Jane Thuet. I've called her Julie a few times, and I apologize profusely about that. But Jane Thuet and Kathleen Black, and we're chatting about their real estate businesses. Jane is a real estate broker in the Whitby area, east of Toronto, and Kathleen is a coach of real estate teams and how they work better as a team. And both of you are speaking in Ottawa at a big convention coming up. And Jane, maybe you can tell us, what website should people go to if they want to use you as a broker in Whitby?
Oh yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Let's Get To It, THUET, or you can look me up on the internet at www.innercirclegroup.ca.
And Kathleen, if people want to read your book or access any of your talks or coaching, how do they do that?
Yeah, we're all over Instagram. So either Kathleen Black _ or Kathleen Black Inc. Or it's KathleenBlack.com, KathleenBlackCoaching.com.
Awesome.
It's easy. Yeah.
So I've heard from some people that not when they're coming out, but when they're sort of in society, in the community, that it's some of the things that I would find natural that they find the most challenging, like holding hands, walking down the street, or dancing at a wedding with someone of the same sex, or, you know, going to a disco or something like that. That's a straight disco, and dancing together. Have you guys encountered any of those kinds of experiences, and what's it been like?
Well, I think for us, I mean, we love to travel, right? So we travel all over the place. So our first trip, we did Istanbul, we hiked Mount Kilimanjaro together. Then we did safari, went to Zanzibar, and then we went to Amsterdam. So it was interesting because family was worried about Istanbul with the different policies, or beliefs. But we actually felt really great the majority of the trip. I think also in Europe, women hold hands. It's not as unusual. Yeah. So I think people just assumed we were sisters or we were holding hands, and people were so kind. We felt safe the entire time, except for one night at a restaurant, and the gentleman kind of our server figured out that we were together, we weren't just friends, and had some comments that made me very, very uncomfortable. And all of a sudden I was aware that, oh wait, people don't actually know, right? That's why you feel safe and comfortable. So, you know, that shook me for a couple of weeks. I was pretty upset about it. Like, I'm a pretty I don't know, I'm sensitive to how people treat me, and I just felt like, oh, I've never been disrespected that way as a straight woman, right? So that was one. Also in Zanzibar, definitely.
I think if people take certain liberties in what they say when you are in a same-sex relationship, that they wouldn't necessarily say to a heterosexual couple, for this gentleman in particular, for fear of probably getting knocked out by your partner. But for the most part, it's not something, I think it's something that maybe you notice a little bit more than me because it's new. For me, it's been so long, and I think I maybe lack some awareness surrounding it, because it's so normal for me to love who I'm with and to be who I'm with, and to be like physically close to or connected with, holding hands, arm around that person. That's normal for me. So I think I kind of have blinders on, but it's definitely more evident at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think though, in fairness, when we go to travel, Jean right away is like, can you research the country?
I'm very aware that it's not okay in every country. And I don't want to spend money and time in a place on our vacation where we're not able to be ourselves and be comfortable.
Right. Given that it's Sexual Health Week, given that, you know, we're talking primarily about the two of yours sexuality, and particularly your sort of coming out of late, what do you want to tell everyone?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's so much power in going internal, in getting right and clear with yourself. And I think it's so easy to cast judgment or have opinions on people externally. But the reality is we're messy, we're humans, we're wrought with contradiction and polarities. And again, that's why I like to dance in the margins, because I'm like, I have so many existing contradictions, but the power is I own them. Right. I'm like, I see that these things don't fit. So I think sometimes we judge outwardly without looking at ourselves introspectively and our personal power. Imagine if everybody elevated their leadership to live in their truth and they focus 90% of their time on that so they could be of service instead of telling people how to live. How would our world change? I think our health in every aspect of life would be better and more inclusive. So I think that.
So don't judge.
Don't judge and let people have room to be who they are and to have access to the resources and the support and the medical and health resources.
Did you ever watch
that they need.
what's it? What Ted Loco? What was it?
Oh, Lasso. I
Lasso?
watched a few of them. Yeah, because everyone recommended. My whole coaching team watched it and
Oh,
loved it.
it was a great show, but he's got this great line that comes from Walt Whitman about don't be judgmental, be curious.
Yeah.
And so that's
And I
exactly
love
what you're talking about. What about you, Jane?
I would say be open. I think it's so important to be authentic and be authentic with, not only your clients, your friends, your communities, and you don't know who's watching and who you're helping by being open and being authentically you and unapologetically out there, living your life with whomever you love. And I think it's empowering for people who are kind of sitting in the sidelines and feeling apprehensive about doing the same.
Well,
Ladies.
Walt Whitman, right? I contradict myself very well. I contradict myself. I'm vast. I contain multitudes. It's beautiful, I think. So you prompted it. I had to include it, Brian.
Ladies, thank you so much for being so open and sharing tonight. I do sessions on diversity and inclusion myself, and I always talk about, one of the things we learned 2000, if not 2 millennium ago, was break bread together, get to know each other, and sit down. And once you have dinner with someone, once you chat with somebody, it's a lot more difficult to dislike them and feel uncomfortable with them, because you find out that they're real human beings and they're authentic and they got the same dreams, goals, and aspirations that you do. And so I think it's wonderful that the two of you have come and shared a little bit about your story. I'd love to hear a lot more, but we'll leave that for another time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jane Thuet and Kathleen Black for coming. And Jane, remind us the website again.
www.innercirclegroup.ca.
And Kathleen?
KathleenBlack.com or KathleenBlackCoaching.com.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and video casts are available on my website, briancrombie.com. Good night, everybody. Thanks.